Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Prehistory Guys Q&A, the monthly spectator sport where people from the internet get to plumb the depths of ignorance of two middle-aged men on the internet calling themselves the Prehistory Guys. Welcome. I'm Michael, in case you didn't know.
Hello, I'm Rupert, in case you didn't know. Yeah. Yes, plumbing the depths. How true. How true.
It's another one of those evenings. Thank you so much for being here, folks. Both people who have been here before and people who haven't. We've been amusing ourselves. We've been touched and moved by watching people chat amongst yourselves in the chat there. And gosh, if nothing else, we seem to have. If we've achieved nothing else, we've created a nice community here of jolly fine folk.
We have, yes. Yeah. Thank you, Sibylla. Yeah, I think we're in good form, actually. It remains to be seen, obviously. But yeah, I can't pretend we took a break, I know, but I can't pretend it was a holiday. We've both been ridiculously busy doing chores kind of things that get neglected when we're working all the time on this.
Yeah. I think we'll have to put an embargo on us complaining about not complaining, just telling people how busy we are. I think they get it. I think they get it. And so, it's good to be back in the hot seat again. I tell you what, there's so many things have been forgotten in the last month about how we do things. So fingers crossed that it'll all go swimmingly well. So I can't say hello to everybody, but hello to you all back. You're very welcome. Yes. Oh, and we'll do our best to keep up with the chat. But if you are new here, please do, let us know who you are and where you're from in the chat. We'll try and keep an eye out and say hello.
We do. I mean, forgive us if we don't mention you, but Annie from Vermont,
yeah.
It's
like for example, hi all from tropical North Queensland. Yeah, that is an early morning start. Blooming heck. Yeah.
That's keen. Thank you very much.
Okay, and Martin, before Caledonia, I've just spotted, Michael Rupert, I have recently made a collaboration video with Dr. John Hill on East Aquary's recumbent stone circle, which looks at the units of length and the line. Yeah. Oh, yes, I have yet to have a good look at that, Martin. But if you feel free, put a link to it in the chat here so people can share it. Feel free.
Yes, do.
Yeah, looking forward to having a look at that. Okay, what before we kick off with the meat and potatoes of the evening, getting to answer your fascinating questions tonight, I have to say. What else in the news? What else can we say in a sort of housekeeping way? We're back from taking a break. Sorry we weren't too communicative about the fact that we were taking one, but it just happened.
Well, the thing about the taking the break, apart from the fact that we had domestic stuff that needed sorting out that we'd kept ignoring, but it was also because you all know, or a lot of you know, that we're the pace is kind of kicking up for Standing with Stones too, and we just knew that if we didn't take a break before that really gets going, then we would probably die in the process. so that was the idea. Yeah, Standing with Stones 2 it's a bit like a snowball at the top of a hill now. It's really gathering momentum. So
and of course, Rupert and I are off from the 10th of September to the 23rd, 22nd of September with the Megalithic Experience Tour. Going from Orkney right down through Kilmartin, Glen, Cumbria, the Midlands, down, and we finish up at Stonehenge. So we'll do our best, to keep posting from the front.
We will.
Yeah.
We will. That's the plan.
we'll try and keep vlogging from the front wherever we are, and hopefully keep you on the inside loop on that as well. Actually, I don't know, guys, are you here? There's a couple of our Patreon folk are going to be with us on the tour. How exciting is that? We are.
Yeah, it is exciting. It is. I tell you what's even more exciting, and I'm sure they won't mind me saying this, but it means that I'm not the youngest person on the tour this year. You two guys, you two Brit guys joining us on the tour, you're both younger than me. How cool is that?
Wow. Okay. The trouble is, we'll be rumbled, Rupert. They'll get really the inside information on what we really do. Anyway, shall we get on with actually answering some questions now?
I think we probably should.
Anything else to bore people with? Okay, so let's do that thing. The first question is from Peter Chesborough. And if I enlarge it for myself, then I might be able to read it to you. I think there's probably more to this question than I'm about to read. Peter asks, did Cornish Tin pay for the new roof on Stonehenge? That he is jesting, he is having a laugh, but he really likes the roof theory. Many other Neolithic constructions had stone supports with either wood, earth, or more stone making up the main structure. Why do English Heritage find it so ridiculous, the idea of the roof on Stonehenge? Do you have a take or a preference on the roof idea? Now, there's two people. I have to say, there's to mention up front. It is our friend. Help me, Rupert. Help me.
What are you thinking?
Well, I'm thinking of the two people that have put forward theories of roofs on Stonehenge.
Well, Bruce Bedlam.
Bedlam, yeah.
Bruce Bedlam's theory is it's lavish. I think it's going a little bit too far, but he also includes different phases of Stonehenge. Which I think is,
I haven't got a picture to share with people. It is elaborate, but Bruce's theory has been around for 20 years because, Bruce was at the premiere of Standing with Stones 1 in Chipping Norton. Do you remember?
He was. That's where we met him.
That's right. And there's another lady whose name I do forget, who's reconstruction of a roof on Stonehenge is much more elaborate, even I think, than Bruce's. So
yes, ironically, it fits more with the phases, but it's just way too fanciful for my liking. I have to say, from my personal perspective, I think that to imagine that Stonehenge was just the stone structure that we see I think that's just completely wrong. I do suspect that a roof makes absolute sense when you look at the work that went into creating the trilithons. You don't need mortise and tenon joints to just put stones on top of each other. And I also think that if you think of it from the observatory point of view, if you're looking at the way the sun or whatever celestial event, how it rises, how it interacts with the stones and the horizon, then that's much more dramatic if you've got a roof on the structure. Because then you're looking at it through, it's like CinemaScope windows. It just makes sense to me that it had a roof, but you know better than me, Mike. You've researched this a lot more than I have. That one of the problems that that English Heritage have with a roof is largely to do with the fact that the phases the phases of building don't really fit, do they?
I think certainly as far as Bruce Bedlam's theory is concerned, because he included the Aubrey holes as footing places for his beams, his rafter things, enormous timbers. And the problem is, of course, it being a multi-phase site, you can't gather all the bits all together to serve one purpose at a single time. No. So I'm afraid that sinks Bruce's theory for me, pretty though it is. Visually, it's compelling. The other problem is that I have it is from an architectural point of view, is that the angles, if you're using the outer circle lintels as support and the inner horseshoe lintels as support, it doesn't make sense archaeologically, architecturally, as a cohesive structure. You'd need both supporting elements to be circular and concentric for it to work. A circle and a sort of off-center horseshoe don't quite work, in my view, unless somebody has got another scheme that can sort of illustrate how that works. The trouble is with the elaborations, and I think somebody mentioned a name. Is it Sarah Eubank? Somebody said, and that rings a bell. Why the comments right over there? Yes, Sarah Eubank. Mary said, asked, and that may or may not be right. But anyway, the elaboration, it's complete pie in the sky, because you can never ever prove. There is no evidence whatsoever. All we've got is the circumstantial evidence of the complete belt and braces overkill solution of the, as you mentioned just now, Rupert, the mortise and tenon in the lintels, and you don't put that kind of thing in place unless you're expecting those lintels to experience some kind of lateral force on them. They were never going to shift in a month of Sundays, unless the supporting lintels, supporting pillars went over. Those top stones were not going to move. So why this time and effort put into the mortise and tenons to stop them moving laterally? That's my question mark, and it's the only one. Yeah. And apart from that, just the thing that it makes sense that it wasn't stone alone. That's all. I've always thought this about most of our monuments, that they
absolutely
disguise themselves because they're they haven't got all the parts visible.
That's the thing. It's the eternal thing, isn't it, of the missing horizontals? That nothing really makes sense unless you see things in their entirety. It's probably going off on one a little bit, but it's a bit like one of the sites that Kenny Brophy has written about in Scotland. Is it even on Arran? Do you know what? I can't remember. No, I'm pretty sure I can't remember where it is. It's in Scotland anyway, and it's a cursus, but it's palisaded. It was palisaded. So there's wooden timber posts running down the sides of this cursus, and they were separated by, I can't remember how many meters between each post. But it is one of the few places where they have found evidence for fencing. The gap between the massive timber posts was filled by smaller post fencing. There's a lot of the Stonehenge landscape. If you look at Mike Parker Pearson's work on it, that it's mile upon mile of like tiny post. The way that we would do a garden fence. Thousands of posts that just make boundaries. Fences. Nobody talks about them as fences, which I don't really know why. But the archaeology is there.
Yeah, no, not Balfag. We are thinking of somewhere else. Martin, the name escapes us for the moment.
Yeah, I can't remember, Martin. If you badger me, because I will forget, but if you badger me, I'll look it up and I'll tell you.
So I think that's sort of we've placed where we are with that one. Do you reckon, Rupert?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sorry if I'm looking a bit distracted. I've got so many things on my screen. It's a tough job.
Yes, and there's some great comments going on. Do you know? Yeah. I think. Do you know what? No, all right, we will do it. It's a little conversation going on here with Sibylla and James. I think, was it James who said that? If you make a ceiling, you make a floor. You might not have said it that way around. I can't see your comment anymore. Yeah, that's true. But there's no evidence that. It's that thing of we're making this up. That okay, so if there was a ceiling, there was a floor. Okay, but just because there's no evidence for it now, it doesn't mean if something fell into disuse in fairly short order, then any of those materials could have been robbed and used somewhere else. That's the trouble with so much of this kind of prehistoric archaeology, that all sorts of conjecture, and you can have all sorts of really convincing ideas, but with no shred of evidence to even begin to build your evidence upon. So, yeah, it's
keep our fingers crossed.
That's absolutely right. But there's again, it's fascinating stuff. It is fascinating stuff. We could make an hour-long program on at least half of the questions that we've been asked this
tonight.
Evening.
Yeah. And I think there is a couple of them we might actually do half-hour program. We could special podcasts on. Easily. So watch this space. I must say, though, Peter wasn't being entirely facetious. I kicked off with him saying, "Did Cornish tin pay for the new roof on Stonehenge?" That was a bit of a non sequitur because he'd put a little preface in there. If British Neolithic tin contributed towards a European Bronze Age, then European trade would have contributed towards Neolithic Britain. That was his jumping off point. We were talking about, because we talk about trade and tin going backwards and forwards from Cornwall. But if the tin was coming from Cornwall, I don't think there'd be a form of economic exchange likely that would help Stonehenge get built.
The thing is, we've actually got no evidence. We've got no evidence for the use of tin in Cornwall before the Bronze Age. That's okay. It could have been happening. People could have been coming for it, but the thing is that if people from abroad knew that tin was available in Britain, then it would be the British indigenous people who were extracting it and knew it was there. So I think it's pushing it back too far. I certainly think it's a really interesting aspect. In fact, I don't think this comes up in a question later on, but it's a really, really fascinating thing that's been coming up in research over the last year or so, that ingots, so not artifacts obviously they're artifacts, but not fancy pieces, ingots of Cornish tin have been found in Greece, in Israel, in the Mediterranean. So clearly the trade in British tin going abroad to make bronze elsewhere was, it was active, very active. Cornish tin all over the place.
Reckless asked, who says those stones are walls? So why? I don't think anybody's actually saying the stones were walls, but is it just a couple of people who have conjectured that maybe that would be a roof? So it's rather the other way around. It's just another way of trying to make sense of what's there, really. They don't have to be, like I said earlier, you still need to be able to view out. It could have been a loose roof. But I think we'll have to leave that anyway. We're not going to be definitive about those possibilities here or probably ever. But it's fun to talk about it anyway.
Yes, it is.
Okay. Thank you for the question, Peter. I don't know if you're there. Let me find my mouse, and I'll move on to a question from Nathan Halsey. Nathan asks, what happened to the original inhabitants of the Orkneys? Do we think they moved to the mainland?
No. It's simple. That's the straight answer.
Yes. But it depends what you mean, Nathan, what you're conceiving as being the original inhabitants of the Orkneys. There's several ways of looking at that, because the original inhabitants, we don't know exactly what they were, but we certainly know that there was an inhabitation in the Mesolithic before the farmers arrived. So are we talking about those folk? I don't think that's what you mean, in which case they probably would have been marginalised somewhat, over time with the arrival of farming.
I wondered if Nathan was referring to, or if he'd got it marginally confused with, I don't mean that unkindly, with the fact that Skara Brae was deserted. And so, it was only Skara Brae, or certainly on, the extreme coastal settlements that were deserted by the massive storms that seem to have hit it. Then that's what.
Well, even that's debated about whether or not it was a massive storm. I think that's completely invented. No, I mean it's an easy story to invent when you realise that the whole of the village has been covered in sand. You think people imagine one cataclysmic event, but not necessarily so. It could just have fallen into disuse. The other thing is, though, the Ness of Brodgar, where we do have a sort of cataclysmic end of the cycle, sort of decommissioning of that site with the sacrifice of, it seems, of a massive herd of cattle. And were they deserting the island then? Again, we've got no evidence, for people actually leaving the island, but certainly massive changes and cultural phases happening.
So how can we best answer Nathan's question then? What happened to the original inhabitants of the Orkneys?
I don't know until somebody comes up with
very happily on the Orkneys. I don't think they went anywhere. I think.
Well, no. The thing is, until somebody comes up with a genetic study, we'll never know the answer to that. To whatever movements there may or may not have been. That's the best we can do. I think, isn't it?
It is really.
I've not really got a lot to add to that, except that. Actually, despite, if we are talking about the end of the Neolithic, there is a lot of continuity on Orkney, despite these evidences of change, and places falling into disuse. But that's an ongoing cycle, it seems, whether you're talking about the Neolithic, Bronze Age, Iron Age, because there is a continuity of culture, it seems, on Orkney. You dig on a broch, an Iron Age broch, and you feel you're still reaching back through time. It is a fact that there are some places, later sites on Orkney, where artifacts from earlier times are being revered as we might revere an archaeological piece, where people are picking stuff up or finding stuff in the landscape or what have you that doesn't belong to them, that was obviously created by people before, and they're being treasured and held in much later sites.
Thank you, Jorman. There is also the aspect that the communities were there for thousands of years. They were well-established communities for thousands of years, and you can still find, in fact, you look in the news this year, that there's another settlement has been found that they think it hasn't been excavated yet, but they think it's going to be like Scarborough that's been found just down the coast. If you go to the west coast of Orkney, they know that there is another stone circle that is probably as big or bigger than the Ring of Brodgar, that is about a quarter of a mile, maybe not as much as a quarter of a mile, but it's certainly 300 yards or something out to sea, which shows how much sea level changes have affected that. So it's the period of time. We keep looking at things as if things happened really suddenly. Yeah. But you look even now, that you look at the flooding that's going on all over the place at the moment. I'm talking mostly about Britain, although it's happening everywhere. That even where my son lives in London, well, that got flooded last week, and they live on a hill. So if things happen, there's a map. You can actually download a map. Who's done it? Can't remember. Sorry. Of the floodplains that they've calculated how the floodplains are going to be in 2050, and places like Cambridge, Soham, all on the west coast, they're back to below the level of the floodplains every year, and so that means that people are going to be displaced. Within a century, people are going to be displaced and moving away. Now, if you apply that to prehistory, we need to stop looking at things as if they happened in this single calamitous moment of time. It's just people gradually moving to places that are more secure. Yeah. That's what would have been happening up on the islands.
That's put a thought in my head, and I think that we get things the wrong way around. Is that the overall cultural change and the movement of people and the displacement of people, it takes place over a much longer period. But what tends to happen is we tend to think of the monuments we see in the landscape as having been there and persisted for a long time. I'm of the view that the idea of a long barrow or the idea of a henge, whatever it may be, is something that takes place really relatively quickly from a cultural point of view, and then persists over time. But the idea, the moment people get the idea that this is a good idea to have one of these things, stone circle, whatever, that everybody, one person does it, then everybody has to have one. And then they're in the landscape for a long time. So that was a digression, and I thought we were finished with...
a reasonable one.
I thought we were finished with Nathan's question earlier than that. I think we should move along. Thanks for the question, Nathan. I don't know if you're there. Alex Graham, you can come off the naughty step. Nobody's, we'd have never known that you were late. Had you not mentioned it? You're welcome. Yeah. Anyway, and welcome to you all, especially people that are here for the first time. Okay. Next. Let me get my control back. I have control, he said. I've lost my mouse again. Okay, that was Nathan. Malcolm next. Malcolm Bannister. Malcolm asks, do you think that Stonehenge should have been left untouched as seen by the in the William Stukeley era? Let me just elaborate that and give you the full question that Malcolm asked, so it doesn't seem... what Malcolm said is quite long. Yeah, it talks about two films that YouTube have in black and white, Pathé News and stuff. No, I won't read it all because it is quite long. But that is the nub of the question, and it's enough of a question to set us off talking for a long time, isn't it? Rupert. And we're talking about the reconstruction of Stonehenge and the phases of Stonehenge. In fairly recent, dating back to the 17th century. We know when things were falling over at Stonehenge right up until the 20th century, and the renovations that were done at the beginning of the 20th century. All those. So, the basic question is, do you think that Stonehenge should have been left untouched as seen by the William Stukeley era? Rupert, a technical thing. Could you turn down your headphones because I can hear my own voice coming back through the...
Can you?
Yep. Yes, they're
How's
bleeding. Yeah, that's much better. Yes, thank you.
Pardon?
Anyway, right, your starter. It's your question. Your starter for 10, Mr. Soskin. Do you think Stonehenge should have been left untouched?
Then, in that case, no, of course not. I think you look at many of the sites that we really treasure in the British landscape, and one way or another, the majority of them have been restored. Even if it's just simply people standing the stones of a circle back up again, or places like Bellisnap, Longbarrows, Stoneleigh Littleton, that have been completely reconstructed from having been completely collapsed. No, I think it's a good thing that these things are restored. Whether we should be doing things like, using concrete to set things up, what have you. All right, that's a moot point. I think it's probably silly not to use technology at our disposal if we know that that's how something was, that you can tell from the socket that the stone was like this. Then, I think it's right that we restore things as much as we can.
I mean, the question is, I don't think people quite realise that it is a question of something or nothing. Either, culturally make the effort to preserve what's there in the landscape, or it will be gone in a shot. Make no bones, because it is not. It doesn't serve landowners to have stuff in the way of the tractor.
No,
it's just a basic thing. There's no return on investment for them in preserving ancient sites, unless they happen to be amateur, aspiring antiquarians themselves. I do know of at least one farmer who is in the Cotswolds who turns out to be have a beneficial bent towards having ancient monuments on his land, and that's a great thing, but it's a rare thing. I can't think of any site that people visit, enjoy, take pictures of, talk about like we're doing here, that would still be there in the landscape if suddenly if people like William Stukeley, John Aubrey, and the like hadn't started paying attention or drawing attention to them in the 17th and 18th centuries. And a movement, the antiquarian movement, which culminated in so many amateur antiquarians and gentlemen antiquarians doing fulsome restoration work and making sure that sites were protected into the 19th century, and the work that English Heritage and the National Trust have done since. I promise you, looking at stuff in the landscape, it just would not be there. You'd have a few lumps in the landscape. Proof of point. Lynham Longbarrow. I did a little piece, a little 5-minute, 6-minute piece for our latest prehistory show, in which I picked a random Longbarrow. Pretty much, it's visible as marked on the Ordnance Survey map. I didn't know what I was going to see. It's not a well-known Longbarrow, but I got there, And I know it's been excavated, but it hasn't. There's been no restoration work gone on there at all. And I kind of made the film to make the point. It's just completely derelict. There's nothing to see. There's nothing to excite the senses. It's just a lump in the land covered by a copse of trees.
That's a very good point.
It's probably only still there because it has a standing stone marking where it is.
Yeah, it's in the way. Yeah, that's true.
And we're talking about a proper, full-blown Neolithic long barrow that hasn't been restored. It's almost not there at all. I know of another one as well that isn't there at all because it's completely ploughed down in the landscape. That I've had the pleasure of excavating on.
If you look at old maps, then old maps will show you the amount of giants' graves around the place, that there's nothing to be seen of them in the landscape at all anymore. So, reconstruction is the way. An interesting point, though, Pat Davis has made a comment here recently at Bryn Celyn Ddu. I loved it, even though heavily reconstructed. Now, the interesting thing about Bryn Celyn Ddu is that the archaeology that's been done there is extensive, and they know the different phases. How it. In fact, we included it in Standing with Stones 1. Some of you will have seen that. Mike did some amazing CGI of how it looked in its different phases. And so it's an interesting thing with reconstruction. If you're looking at a site that's gone through different phases, what phase do you reconstruct?
Yes.
How do you prioritize which is the one that people should see?
Yeah, and relate.
Obviously, there isn't an answer to that.
Another sort of. I've just inherited a lot of books that belong to my my wife's father, who was a collector of of archaeological books, and you just have to go back not that many years to gazetteers from 20th century, early 20th century, 1920s, 30s, or even later. And you're guaranteed there'll be monuments in there that just do not exist. And that's, not that long ago anymore. Anyway, I think the point has been made. I think we've nailed that question. We've nailed our colours to the...
Reconstructions all the way.
Yeah. I think, Rupert, so that done, I think, Rupert, now would probably be a jolly fine time to have a talk about Standing with Stones 2.
That's a good idea. Now it's a commercial break.
A bit of context, though, for there are 138 people watching us at the moment, which is
Hello,
great.
Everybody.
So not everybody, I presume, they will be aware that we kicked off way back 15 years ago, making a film called Standing with Stones, which none of us would be here now if it hadn't been for that film.
Michael had hair.
That's yeah. But long story short, all down through the years since we made Standing with Stones, people have been asking us, when are we going to make the next one? When are we going to make the next one? And our resistance has been when somebody gives us the money, because, it's not exactly the most economically viable path to fame and riches, making a film about rocks in fields. So, but nevertheless, now we have the interweb and such things as Kickstarter and all other sorts of things of enabling people to crowdfund stuff. We reckon it's time. The time is ripe for Standing with Stones 2. So what I'd like to do now is run a little promo film that we've put together, which... I won't witter anymore. Let me just find it and I'll let it run. Okay, enjoy.
Imagine, let's go back 4.5 to 5,000 years into the Neolithic period. 12 years ago, we made a feature-length film about the ancient sites of Britain and Ireland called Standing with Stones. And we both love the Stones, and it really was a passion project for both of us.
Yeah, we gathered a dedicated band of faithful fans over the years who always said that they wanted us to do more.
Yeah, well, we listened.
We did.
And we're back.
Hey! And for the last few years, we've been making podcasts, short films,
doing interviews and loads more about prehistoric archaeology. And of course, we now call ourselves the Prehistory Guys.
And we're still listening. And it seems that when it comes down to it, you want us to make another film.
So not to beat about the bush, that's what we're going to do. And this little video is about how you can help us to do that.
Right now we're pulling together our ideas about the story we're going to tell in Standing with Stones 2, and towards the end of the year we'll begin the launch process for a Kickstarter fundraising campaign that'll power the actual production of the film.
In the meantime, there is work to be done, and there are two ways you can be involved starting right now. A, through monthly subscription, and B, with a one-off donation.
We already have a wonderful Patreon community that you can join, and that's really the best way to get on the inside track with the development of the new film, and of course all the other stuff we do. Our Patreon folk get masses of content that no one else does, and we keep them up to date with everything we're doing through regular live chats and shows.
On the other hand, if you'd prefer to make a one-off donation that'll go forward to support the production of the film next year, we've got a Buy Me a Coffee campaign going, so you can do just that.
There are links to both routes to helping make this happen, and where you can get more info down below in the description. And a big thank you if you take the time to have a look.
In the meantime, thanks for listening. We'll look forward to seeing you around.
There. Yeah, thanks for watching. And of course, we're very aware that for the most part, we're already talking to people that are already supporting us. Yeah. So I hope you don't mind, having to go through that. We're not trying to squeeze the life out of you. But I think the point about doing a Kickstarter campaign or raising funds is that you have to keep pushing it. You have to keep pushing it. So I hope people that are already supporting us won't get too cross that we ask. We make the ask quite a lot. We'll be making the ask quite a lot of times over the next few months. So bear with us. That said, if you're not already a supporter, links are down below in the description, both to Patreon and our Buy Me a Coffee campaign. So your assistance in making the film would be gratefully received. Anything more to say, Mr. Soskin?
No, I'll only get grouchy. It just reminded me of a couple of comments that we got on YouTube a couple of weeks ago, where somebody was actually complaining, and they said that they were going to unsubscribe from our channel because we kept on asking people to have a look at our Patreon page or what have you.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, how much of your life do you actually spend deliberately giving people things for nothing? Asking for help is not the worst thing that you can do. It's funny that, never mind.
Shall we move along
and
do our proper job now and answer some more questions? How many are we?
Thank you, Milo.
I've forgotten. Where are we? We're to Northern Lace. Hello, Northern Lace. You've never been on or asked a question before, so thank you for the question. And we gather that you live on Orkney from this question. Northern Lace says, I like your idea that henges were places for spectacles. But my local doesn't fit that. I live a few miles from the Ring of Brodgar, which is built on a rocky slope. Absolutely true. There are plenty of flat areas close by, so why didn't an obviously intelligent group of people go for the soft option to the left or right of the actual ring? It's a really interesting and deep question.
It's a lovely question.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
And the thing is that there are so many important points to just kind of tick off. Number one, we don't believe that all henges were for spectacles. We do think a lot of them were, but we think that that a lot of them, the majority of them possibly, were for livestock management in one way or another.
Yeah, or auction, or just simply practical things like auction rings, and anything like that. I don't think, for the moment, that would be the sole purpose of the Ring of Brodgar. And in many ways, you're absolutely right. Ring of Brodgar is a bit of an anomaly in that regard, but an awful lot of effort.
It's a total anomaly, in as much as it's certainly, but it's hugely unusual in the fact that it's rock cut. So this is not soil that's been dug out to make a bank and ditch. It's dug into bedrock. The work involved on creating the Ring of Brodgar is massive, and there is no evidence to support that it ever had a bank. It just had a ditch. Now that's interesting in itself, and the implication is, if we're right, for example, if we're right that a ditch was obviously it would keep livestock inside, they couldn't run out, they couldn't escape from it. But if the banks at the soil dug henges were raised for spectators, then the implication would be that at Brodgar it was for managing livestock in one way or another, where there were no spectators. There was no need for a bank for spectators. Now, whether we're right in that hypothesis or not, asking the question, why would they have built it on that slope? I mean, it's not a massive slope, is it? It's it's not flat, but the thing is that the land around it, if it's very soft and what have you, you've got to bear in mind as well that how many centuries of ground cover are we looking at? That if that was cut in bedrock, it could be that the central plateau of the Ring of Brodgar was a flat rock surface. That they'd cleared all the earth off it and everything else, and it's just the rock substrate. That would be a reason not to have put it on the softer soil on the surrounding areas that you're mentioning, I think. I mean, obviously at this stage it's unknowable, but that makes sense to me anyway. What do you think, Mike?
Well, it depends how much of the area was already taken, by you've got Barnhouse down the, not far away, and of course the Ness, not far away either. I don't know. I mean, I think, to be fair, Northern Lace has got a point. If I was trying to prove our hypothesis, I wouldn't start with using Brodgar to do it.
No, absolutely not.
That's why I say, if it is slightly not. Northern Lace is absolutely right to point out the flaws in our argument if it's applied to Brodgar. We really need to get our sort of thinking caps on to incorporate the uniqueness of Brodgar into the scheme. Stennis down the road, on the other hand, is a beautiful plateau. In fact, it's such a wonderful plateau, you begin to wonder if it wasn't manufactured as a plateau.
True. No, but there is.
Don't go there. Don't go there. I mean, that was pure.
Okay.
That was,
but I think the most important point there is that obviously we could never say that any type of site ever served a single function. Things are circumstantially the same. Circumstantially, I don't mean that. I mean superficially the same. Is what I mean. So things can serve all sorts of different functions, as we've said many times. That it's like arenas today. That they might be the football match at the weekend, but they could be a rock concert or a Jehovah's Witness meeting, or even a car boot sale. We
do know something. we have to look at the chronology of everything, and how the Ringerbrodga relates to the settlement, or whatever you like to call it, at the Nesserbrodga, and how chronologically they relate to each other. But we know, as we mentioned before, what went on at the end of the use of the Nesserbrodga site, and there was this mass slaughter of these cattle. Clearly, the cattle were really, really important. And the other, also the fact that this whole thing, Stennes, the Ness, and the Ring, all on this isthmus between the two lochs. It's a very, very peculiar place to have such an arrangement, that so much activity was concentrated on this very narrow isthmus, and the fact that it is so particular has to ask, makes you ask questions about why. Sorry, I'm hearing myself back in your from your headphones again.
If I turn you down anymore, then I won't be able to hear you at all.
It's never mind. Okay.
I could put bigger headphones on.
It's okay for the time being. It's just that thing when you can hear yourself back a bit.
I do know what you mean. I've
trips
turned
you
you
up
down even more. There's
Any-
a few points that I'd pick up in the comments.
Yes.
Here. Sibylla said, surely the intention to make a lasting mark on the landscape must be in there. Livestock management can be done with timber posts and fences.
Yeah.
It's absolutely true.
Yeah.
It's absolutely true. And there are all sorts of reasons. Again, we could talk about this for hours.
Yeah.
Yes, that does have to be factored in. And certainly circle henges are... do I even want to go there?
Probably
it's the fact
not.
that they're multi-use sites. We don't, we're not suggesting they're just done for one thing. But I think I'm going to have to leave it there because we will talk for an hour.
Because I think we have to do a bit of a vague cop out as far as Brodga is concerned. We'll have to work on that.
I think we have to do a vague cop out with Brodga simply because of where it is. Because everything on Orkney is outrageous.
Yeah.
It's an
Kevin
exercise
says
in insanity, really.
Kevin Riley says Nesserbrodga, fresh water on one side, seawater on the other. It is now. Yeah. I read somewhere, I'm sure, that it was not always that way. That the fact that one of the lochs has become a freshwater loch is a recent development.
I'm going to plead total ignorance on that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that was a
I
thing.
couldn't begin to remember
Janet,
where I picked that up.
Has said water, not red wine. I hope you're well, Rupert. Yes, thank you, Janet. It's just
somebody suggested it was a pint of vodka earlier as we were running the ad. Yeah.
No, it is water, and I have more. It's roasting here. We're going up to 38 tomorrow.
Ooh,
that's a shade temperature, so it's going to be crazy.
Cheers, folks.
I'm not complaining. Sofa Loafer says edge cases don't result in much usable general data. Absolutely true. Thank you very much. Kevin Callanish was discovered in the 1800s. It was completely covered in peat. Have you seen how tall the stones are? That's a really very good point. That Callanish was absolutely invisible. And as you say, how tall is the main, the tallest of the stones there? What is it, 10 foot tall? Something like that. Can you think? It just shows how much peat did grow up, in a few thousand years, but well, it depends when it fell into disuse. Yeah, it's absolutely true. We need to factor these sorts of things in.
Yeah. Anyway, Northern Lace, whoever you are, don't know your real name, unfortunately. There was a lot more timber on Orkney at the time. I don't know what the sequence is for timber on Orkney, but there haven't been trees for a long time.
No,
or available timber for a long time.
There were areas of woodland. There was more than we thought when we made Standing with Stones 1.
'Tis true.
But still, not a huge amount anyway. Martin says Ring of Buchan. Yeah, now the Ring of Buchan, that's an interesting one because it's not very exciting in the landscape unless you see it from the air, is it? But it must have been a hell of a thing back in the day. Yeah, true.
Kevin Rowan Druitt says the depth of Avery henge is way beyond what will be needed to keep animals in. Just to be clear, we're not suggesting it was a farm. Avery is a farm. It needed to, as far as Avery is concerned, that is something where you've got an arena going on, and the need is to contain animals temporarily, not to keep them in permanently. As far as that's my
the reason for the reason for the depth of the ditch is, in our opinion, to raise the height of the bank. The ditch is purely supplying the building material to increase the height of the ditch. And that's why if you go to, there are various henges that are double-ditched henges where you have a ditch on the inside of the bank and a ditch on the outside of the bank. These almost invariably occur where the underlying geology won't support a deep ditch. So either the bedrock is too close to the surface or it goes down to gravel, which means that the ditch would then collapse. So what they did was they dug a very neat ditch on the inside of the bank. And then when they needed more soil to raise the height of the bank, then they dug another ditch on the outside of it, which was almost invariably pretty messy. They didn't bother about keeping the outside ditch tidy. Which is quite telling, that if it's just that you need more soil because you've got a bigger audience, the spectators, the audiences have grown over the years, and you need more seating, so you raise bigger banks. I would love us to be able to do a soil analysis. Don't even know if this is possible. We are going to talk to Mike Allen about it. That if you can imagine, supposing that you had timber seating, benches all the way around the banks. That's what I think, anyway. And now, when that degrades and erodes away over years, would because you can measure with magnetometry, you can tell that there was wood in the soil. Would you get a smearing as wood degrades and then it slumps? As the bank slumps over the years, would you get a kind of the signs that wood had streaked over time? I don't know. It might be immeasurable, but it would be great to be able to show that they had timber seating.
But Genie X has got it. Henges as farmers' markets, auctions.
Absolutely.
That's the way of thinking. Yeah, it doesn't mean that everyone was, or everyone that they were all used in exactly the same way, but. Yeah, farmers' markets, and people were, because that's what people did. That's what people do. They come together, and especially the agricultural shows. My analogy is more modern day agricultural shows. Where people come together with all sorts of skills and to share and to exchange, and seasonally. They are. A parallel to the henge is the existing. I don't know. It probably not everybody, unless they're a farmer or live in the countryside, are aware of these permanent structures that are there for people to come together at one time in the year. Usually only used for this purpose 1 or 2 times a year. But people like places like the Great Yorkshire Showground in Harrogate. That's permanently there to support an event that happens, once, twice a year? I mean, it's used for other stuff as well, but the big event is an agricultural show. Everybody brings their tractors, their prize animals, and people wander about and they do auctions, and they have individual enclosures, usually one big enclosure. I mean, the parallels are just too good to be true. Well, too good to ignore anyway. That's for sure. Rupert, we're going very slowly. We are an hour into this show, and we really haven't got our motor running. I think we should move on to Ian's question. Ian Tarry has a question for us. What do you think or know about the theory stroke discovery that 3 or 4 tribes appear to make up the majority of modern-day Europe's native population? Do you think it can tell us or teach us much about how or why population migration happens, and does this help us understand anything extra about the cultures of ancient Europe, or even the modern day language? Don't quite get the.
Do you know what? I'm inclined to almost park this one. And move it to.
Well, Ian, to be fair to him, did give us the opportunity. I mean, he says, if you don't want to answer that one particularly, what are your thoughts on the cancellation of the Stonehenge tunnel, which is probably an easier one for us to dive
talk about
in.
That.
Yeah. I mean, the populations thing and the tribes thing is a sort of.
It's massive.
We need to. It's so massive, and I think, Ian, this is one of those questions that inspires us to do a deeper dive at a later date and come back, with a more cohesive, up-to-date relaying of what current archaeology and genetics tells us about that.
I think one of the points to make, which will clarify why we're saying this, is that. The theory that modern day Europeans came from 3 or 4 tribes, maybe, but again, it depends what period in history you're actually looking at. I mean, there were 12 separate Celtic tribes, apart from anything else, if you're going back to late Bronze Age, Iron Age. Now,
I don't think Ian meant tribes. I don't think Ian meant tribes, although that's the word he used.
I'm not sure he meant tribes, but if you're talking about people like the Yamnaya and what have you, then we could make an hour-long program just about that, couldn't we?
Yeah. But I think we should. I think we should. Absolutely do that. For our own education. I was sort of half joking at the top of the show, joking at the top of the show, and I said where people on the internet get to plumb the depths of the. Our ignorance. But at the same time, we do learn from doing this ourselves as well. So that's all cool. But however, the second part of the question, what do we think about the cancellation? Has it been cancelled? That's not clear
Judge
either.
Overturned it.
Yeah.
The plans are still going ahead.
Yeah, I mean, imagine they are massive. So, turning that tanker around is going to be something else. However,
do you want to go first?
Well, it's difficult because we don't know what was presented inside that courtroom. We don't know what was presented to the judge, and what he heard that had him come to that conclusion. Sorry, Rupert. Yeah.
No, go on. You haven't finished.
Oh, I thought you wanted to say something. My instinctive reaction, I was deeply disappointed when I heard that. I thought, upon what grounds? Because, I've been going past Stonehenge for a long time. And although one enjoys the view coming over down the cutting there and emerging to see Stonehenge on the horizon there, I've been longing for the time when that road was disappeared from that landscape, and just when I thought, oh right, it's going to I just fear for what we'll actually end up with if this ball is kicked down the road for too long. because there's got to be some kind of solution. And I don't think. I mean, I'd like to be proved wrong, but I don't think we're going to get a longer tunnel.
Well, one of the problems is always going to be that you have naysayers. That might sound disrespectful if any of you don't agree with us, and you think that the tunnel shouldn't be made.
I don't doubt a lot of people do disagree with us.
I'm not being disrespectful to you, but my thinking is that it's another aspect of you can have people who drive down that road once a year, complaining that this shouldn't be done, and the thing is that a lot of people forget that there are people who commute down that road. They travel down that road every day. And in the summer months, they sit there for hours where the traffic bottlenecks. So to do nothing isn't really an option. It's certainly not a long-term option because traffic is only going to get worse. Now, as Tim Darvill said, the fuss about the archaeology has been done. When they dug the A303, they screwed all that up already. Now, okay, you've got the entrances, at either end of the tunnel that, okay, there'll be some damage, but equally, there'll be an awful lot of stuff that potentially could be discovered in doing that. And you can't forget that the vast majority of archaeological discoveries today, the world over, are made because of development. They're digging a road, they're building a housing estate, and something gets discovered at the time. So either we dig the tunnel, or the other options are widen the road. Well, if you widen the road, you're going to destroy an awful lot more archaeology than digging the tunnel. The only other alternative is to make the southbound bypass that they suggested a while ago, in which case you're going to destroy archaeology over however many miles.
Oh, but that's an ecological disaster as well.
And completely
going down disaster. To the south, yeah.
And the only other point that I would make, and it's actually probably the one that annoys me most, is that the Stonehenge English heritage landscape, this sacred landscape, those boundaries are utterly arbitrary. They happen to be the land boundaries of what was bought back at the time. You step outside that, just go to the other side of the roundabout that's outside the English heritage boundary to the west. The archaeology under that, good grief, what they would discover in there. And yet people are saying, no, we want to, if you're going to make a tunnel, make it a longer tunnel. Yeah, the archaeology is just as rich. The fact that there is a boundary to the English heritage land is an utter irrelevance. I'll shut up now.
Sibylla asked, isn't it, that everybody's scared of UNESCO? Like I say, we weren't inside the hearing, so don't know about that. But the UNESCO threat is insane.
Somebody was rude to me on YouTube, or was it Facebook, one or the other, when this person, can't remember their name, actually said, when I commented on the UNESCO thing, and I said that it was just a bunch of idiots who'd said this, because they've said that the tunnel would basically cause untold damage to Stonehenge's universal value. It's like you think, well, how can a tunnel in a road a mile away or half a mile away actually have any impact on the importance of Stonehenge to start with? I thought, obviously, I'm missing something here, so I got hold of the full UNESCO report. Yeah. And read that, and no, that didn't make it. It's still stupid. So contacted Tim Darvill, because Tim, he, for any of you who might not know, I mean, Tim is just one of the greatest archaeologists we have in Britain, and so I buzzed Tim a line and said, look, am I missing something here? Because this just seems crazy. And he said, no, absolutely not. He said, look at what they're suggesting at Liverpool. They want, forget the fact that it needs to be useful for the people who actually live there, perish the thought. But to suggest that removing the road from the landscape and putting the landscape back to how it was 5,000 years ago is damaging the value of Stonehenge, is utterly stupid.
It makes my head explode.
This person on social media said to me, said, Rupert Soskin, if you simply don't understand the issue, it would have been more sensible just to say so. So I simply replied with, really? I didn't say anything else. It's like, just go and play with somebody else in the playground. You know, it's just, if you're going to be a child, it makes me angry. Have a reasonable argument, and offer alternative points. But I have not spoken to anybody or read anything that gives a valid reason for why the tunnel would be detrimental to the Stonehenge landscape at all. None. Somebody tell me.
Yeah, and it's mostly to do with the archaeology. People use the thing of the archaeology, lost archaeology, destroyed archaeology, but people not really understanding how archaeology gets done in that case.
And the thing is that it would be found archaeology. It wouldn't be lost archaeology. It would be found archaeology. Because
yes.
These people are suggesting that we never dig it up, that we just don't research it at all. Leave it there. Leave it under the ground. It's sacred. Fine. Yeah. We'll all learn nothing. Sorry.
I think we better move along, actually. Yeah, okay, cool. I mean, it's such a long conversation, but we won't do it here right now. Okay.
Yes, Sibylla, yeah, I sympathise.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you very much. Are you there, by the way? I think you are. Anyway, moving on. Lynn Bailey asks, hi, guys. Hoping this time I got my question in the right place. Oh, yes, you have. It's probably a rookie question. Actually, I didn't include that, did I? She just says, I've always wondered if dolmens were originally buried, so the capstone just had to be slid into place rather than hoisted, which in some cases appears to be an impossibly difficult enterprise. I mean, we have touched on this sort of a couple of times before, but, we don't mind going round on this one a bit. And I don't think we can be definitive about the answer to that either. I had always assumed that they were covered. Other people say no. But what's your take, Rupert?
Well, it is known that there were some that were covered and some that weren't. Trethevi Quoit, for example, in Cornwall, was never completely covered. The earth bank went up about 4 feet, metre and a half. Mm. And when you think how tall that dolmen is, it's probably one of the biggest in Britain. So no, it certainly wasn't covered. Chun Quoit is another one that is supposedly was not covered. But I think, Lynn, your question, if you like, that you thought that if buried so that the capstone could be slid into place. I think an important point there is that it's quite possible that many of them were that a soil bank was placed there so that you could drag the capstone into place, and then the soil could just be removed when the job was done. So I don't think you're wrong there at all. It's quite possible. Makes sound engineering sense. It's certainly true to say that raising a capstone to engineers, and I mean engineers back in the day, to people who know how to move stones around, that wouldn't have been a problem for them. Really wouldn't. When you look at some of the stones in Egypt, which, forget any of the fanciful things about aliens doing whatever, or people coming out with no, it was far more likely that they did it with levitation. Of course, that's more likely, yes. But the fact that you can see that there are even a couple of places where they stopped the quarrying, but they had started to excavate a couple of 2,000-ton blocks of stone, And they've got a long way into it when it looks like from the excavations that, maybe whichever ruler at the time died and it was, all right, we won't do that then. But the point is, the very fact that the excavations got to that extent means that they were pretty confident that they knew how they were going to move those lumps of stone. It's our problem, our modern attitude to everything must be easy. We have this thing of it's got to be easy or straightforward, and it has to be able to be done, in a short space of time. Otherwise, it's a waste of time. But people didn't think that way. They didn't think that way at all. It was, even you're just going back to the Renaissance, that how many architects who designed a cathedral, how many of them knew that they'd be there to see it actually finished? Probably none. It's you design something for the future. You build it for the future. You don't build it for the now. And I think that's an important point about archaeology as well. Different attitude to things.
To get back to the earth covering thing, the thing is, it's actually very difficult. It's more difficult to cover something in earth for permanence than it is to put a rock on top of 3 other stones.
That's very true.
Because soil does not persist unless it's got something, a matrix to hold it in place, which is the case with your barrows and your long barrows. You've got turf, and we don't even know that the turf was there in the first place. That long barrows may have been just exposed cairn material that was quarried locally, and stones piled up. We don't have that kind of evidence. And also, a dolmen on itself, the structure on itself, just could not support cairn material that wasn't going to collapse inwards. So in the spirit of a kind of maintaining a chamber, if people were buried there, that they contained burials, I don't really see. It's more of a problem covering something with earth than it is putting a stone on the top of it, strangely enough. If you want it to stay looking that way in the first place. What I could buy into is the fact that there would be a raised area around, sort of immediate to the dolmen, a raised bank of earth, perhaps to prevent animals getting in or something like that. I don't know.
Well, there are saucer barrows that do that, aren't there? In fact, like the quartz chambered one on the Isle of Man, that had the bank around it.
Yeah. But I fear, with those sort of caveats expressed, that's where we have to kind of leave it. And I don't know what the consensual thinking is these days about that in the archaeological community. Somewhere, yeah, okay. So, well, it was a good airing of that subject this time around, Lynn. Thank you so much for asking. And, ask again. We look forward to your next question. Secular Tube. Where are you? Secular Tube, are you there? This is not a prehistory question. What is your favourite biscuit and or savoury nibble preference? Okay, we're allowed a few seconds here because...
Well, I think this question says more about Secular Tube than it does about us.
It probably is, yes. Are we being baited here, whoever you are?
Yeah, we probably are. See, for me, it's the wrong way around. I've always wanted to be sponsored by Haribo.
Yeah. But some people think we are sponsored by Haribo.
But okay, well, I'll have to answer it honestly then, and I'll have to answer your question honestly, as opposed to what I wish your question was. And that's favourite biscuit, Jaffa cake. Savoury nibble has got to be a pork pie. I can't think of another savoury nibble.
A favourite biscuit is a good ginger biscuit in a cup of tea. For the dunking of. Savoury nibbles.
Savoury nibble?
Packet of crisps, mate.
Packet of crisps, fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. See, I've never understood the
I don't think
thing,
I'll go down the Twiglets route here.
I've never understood the thing of taking a lovely crisp biscuit and sticking it in tea to make it soggy. Never got that.
It's it's.
I appreciate I'm in the minority on that, but hey ho.
Yes, it's not a concept though, Rupert. It's an
Benjamin
experience.
says hobnobs have a Mesolithic aura. Damn right they do. I'm totally with you on that.
Yeah. But if we're talking about biscuits, here are the facts of the matter. I mean, talking about a hobnob, I never choose a hobnob over a ginger biscuit. I never choose there is a pecking order. There is a hierarchy here. That said, leave me in a room with a packet of hobnobs, disaster.
I have the most appalling sweet tooth. Nothing is safe. Yeah,
we must be, and when we're doing Standing with Stones 2, we must be disciplined about this. Otherwise, we'll make ourselves very ill, and we'll give ourselves all sorts of aging diseases.
No, Jennifer, really, I do know what I'm missing. It's a disgusting habit. I can't bear soggy. I can't bear soggy. Anything like, God almighty, you make something the consistency of rice pudding. Why would you do that? Crikey.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, shall we move swiftly along?
Move on. Haribo's.
We'll make a separate.
Haribo is watching, sponsor us. That will be fine.
We'll make a separate podcast about this one as well.
Cream crackers and Stilton, very, very nice.
Oh,
stop it, people! Stop it.
Oh, the Stilton thing. Oh,
Bath Oliver's too expensive.
Oh, right. Okay. No, there's some very nice sort of salted, sort of peppered biscuits that go very well with cheese down in the cupboard. You sort of that would do. Let's move on. This is terrible. Benjamin Lawrence, what examples are there of bartered artifacts, and how did these transactions transition to something resembling money? Now, trade is one of
this is such a lovely question.
Big question marks.
That's quite an abbreviated question.
Yes. Do you want me to?
Not necessarily.
Yes.
It's just,
let me read the Benjamin's entire thing. It's not too long. Hi guys, in your last show you were talking about jade axes, jadeite to be precise, jade axes and shells being used as tokens of exchange in prehistory. What examples are there of bartered artifacts, and how do these transactions transition into something resembling money? Did a desire for clarity in accounting mark the cusp of prehistory? That's such a good way of putting it. A stabilizing documentation, encouraging the proliferation of writing. What a thought. In a contemporary context with so much debt, how abstract a concept is money anyway? Feel free to extemporize.
I tell you, it's interesting that you should even ask this question, because it's something that we've actually been looking into a bit recently because of some papers that came out about a month ago. Something that is particularly interesting is because of modern tech, all these advances in how we can measure and analyze, it's meant that an awful lot of archaeologists are now going back to old collections in museums and looking at stuff that's been locked away for 100 years, just to see if we can learn anything new about it. And they found that there are these little, they're clay, or sometimes they're metal, but they're usually clay or stone. And it's known that they're weights, that they could be used on balance.
Can I just interject? Yes. Hold that thought where you are. I just need, people have picked up on the fact that there's a sound emanating from
your
behind.
Dog.
He's changed his mind. He's complaining bitterly that he can't get up into the back of this chair. He used to be able to get into the back of my chair and sit in the small of my back, but he can't. He's right royally cross. He can't get up. So yeah, sorry about the background noises. It's not it's not a farting dog. It's just moaning and settle down now. Anyway, sorry to interrupt, Rupert. I thought that needed clarification.
That's all right. What they found was that these. So they measured in every possible way over 2,000 weights that came from over 2,000 years of history. And they found that they were all the same. So you had a weight system that's been in place for 5,000 years and across many countries. Now, the discrepancy was about 5%, lightest to heaviest, that they were essentially the same. They then found, this is another piece of research, separate paper, that there are lots of places where you find random bits of bronze, scraps of bronze, that, we had looked at some previously and thought, where people have said this is the ritual breaking up of a sword, what have you. And we're thinking, no, it's not. It's the breaking up of a sword so that it can be melted down and reforged into a new bronze artifact. And what they found was, when they analysed and weighed all these scraps of bronze, is that they are all multiples of each other in weight. So basically, there was a standard weight system throughout Europe, going from Egypt right the way across into Europe. Now, it started in Egypt, say, 5,000 years ago. It didn't get into Europe until it's about 3,000 years ago. So it took a long time for this to be standardized over the whole region. But the thing was that people still did have this standardized way of measuring, what is this worth? This weight of such and such is worth this weight of something else. The point is they had a standardized measurement. The particularly interesting thing about it is that previously, particularly with the Egyptian stuff, it had always been presumed, archaeologists and historians had always presumed, that a weight-based system, a measuring system like that, would have been top down. It would have been a ruler, king, whoever. It would have been a ruler who dictated that things should be this way. But in fact, from all these artifacts and looking at where they were excavated and what have you, it shows that no, it was actually the merchants and the common people who were deciding that we need to have a sensible way of all doing this together. It was coming from the bottom up, not the top down. That's interesting as well. So yeah, measuring and bartering, Lord knows what the values were, but yeah, it really was a thing, and they were a lot more sophisticated about it than we ever thought.
Yeah.
I was offered 70 camels for my wife in Egypt. I
70.
don't know if any of you can better that.
Well, Dale was offering to donate to Standing with Stones 2 in seashells and green rock.
Thank you. Thank you, Dale.
If you got a greenstone axe, that would come in handy, actually.
A greenstone axe would be wonderful. Yeah, it would. We'll tell you more about that on another occasion.
Yeah. To answer another part of Benjamin's question, though, what examples are there of bartered artifacts, and how do these transactions transition to something resembling money? The trouble is there aren't actually examples of bartered artifacts because we can't tell.
How would you know?
How would you know if they were bartered or not? That's the thing. So so we're into deep sort of uncharted waters with it, but it happened. Trade happened, and it's such a great question. How much of an influence on the culture of a place? And I love your thing about this thing of accounting leading to history. You know, the driver for writing was not the communication of ideas, but making sure everybody knew who owed what.
Yeah.
Who owned what and who owed stuff. Yeah. I love that idea. Anyway, have we dried up on that, Rupert? For the time being,
it's one of those things. I can go off on one, and I could, and I'll just get boring for half an hour.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we've been, on point and asking, yeah, we've extemporized. So feel free to extemporize, Rupert. You did.
I did. No shame.
Job's a good one then. Okay, let's have a look at Dale's question. Dale Parkinson's asks, are there new methods in science that can detect diseases in the bones or the soil, in a prehistoric burial site? It's a fantastic question. I meant to go away and do a bit of research myself about this, but I failed miserably. Did you manage to dredge anything up on this subject?
There's a few things about this that are really interesting, really. The honest truth is, Dale, as far as I'm aware, there aren't any new techniques specifically. It's just that tech is getting so much more sensitive that the same techniques are giving us just better and better results all the time. And there's something we've talked about before, actually. I mean, we know that the oldest, the earliest known case of bubonic plague is from the Bronze Age. It's 5,000 years ago. I did look into a few other things to see what they've been able to analyze some stuff. Salmonella, for example. Salmonella in various forms has been in the archaeological record. The earliest found cases are 6,300 years old, and that apparently relates to our relationship with pigs. It's one of the zoonomic problems that can pass between animals and back. What else was there? Leprosy. Leprosy goes back a long way, even though, now that was an interesting thing, if I remember this correctly, that the earliest directly analysed case of leprosy is from 600 BC, but they could tell from the DNA of the leprosy that it actually came from a pathogen that was around in the Paleolithic. So, you're saying new techniques. I mean, the fact that you can analyze the DNA of a pathogen and extrapolate backwards is really quite spectacular, really.
You know
what I mean? One of the other ones, the bacteria responsible for whooping cough, they can date that back to like 2.5 million years ago, something like that. It's crazy, really. And I think that the most recent technique, the fact that they can now extract DNA just from the soil, where basically somebody just melted into the ground or whatever. The fact that you don't need a bone now, or you don't need hair now, you can actually extract it from the soil if you know it was there. I find that utterly incredible.
The phrase or the thing you're talking about is sedimentary DNA, and it's a phrase we first heard used by Vince Gaffney when we interviewed him. What was it last year?
All hail Vince Gaffney.
All hail Vince Gaffney. He was talking about sedimentary DNA in respect to sending down the samples that were taken from the seabed over Doggerland to establish who was living where, and this hang on, what? Sedimentary DNA? It exists in the, down on Doggerland.
How did you do that then?
Yeah. Now, that said, I think it's more to do with flora and fauna, and seeds and that kind of thing that have been left behind even so. Not so much, we're finding the remains of human beings down there. We're finding the remains of the effect of human beings having occupied a certain thing. But sedimentary DNA is a thing. Who knew?
Yeah. Who knew?
Actually, it's been around for a while, but, just shows how much we know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Reckless. DNA from soil, mind buggering up. Yep, that's right. Yeah.
It's in a nutshell.
Mind's mangled.
Yes.
And I think are we moving on? Are we? If that is okay with you, Dale, Benjamin. No, sorry. What question were we answering there? Dale. Oh, yeah. Yes, we will move along to whatever's coming next. If I can get my thing to work. There we go, Dale. Nigel is next. Nigel asks us, we know about the interbreeding of Homo sapiens with earlier hominids. I was wondering what the successful birth rate might have been. So you did say, in addition to that it may be outside of our expertise, and you're bang on point there.
I feel churlish, really, when we know that Nigel's watching.
Indeed. Yeah.
Yeah, it is anthropology, really, isn't it? I don't know. I mean, it is interesting. I just don't know there's that much we can say about it.
There's not much value in us, speculating about that. And it's just
No, I mean, the only thing I would say, because he does make an interesting point. You've abbreviated the question, didn't you?
Yeah, I did.
He makes an interesting point about interbreeding between Neanderthals and Homo sapiens, and whether it would have been easier because Neanderthals were stockier, whether it would have been easier with a mixed pairing if it was a Neanderthal woman that was giving birth to a human Neanderthal pairing rather than a Neanderthal, a Homo sapiens woman, because of the extra size of the skull and the birth canal. And it is an interesting point, and it reminded me of research that to do with modern humans. This was medical research that was it's only been solidly known for a few years, maybe 10, something like that. That what's the tipping point in the human body? When does a mother's when do the waters break, and that birth has to happen now? And it's when the baby's demands, nutritional demands, if you like, are more than the mother can now supply. So that basically the mother's body is providing all the necessary nutrients until it can no longer do that, and that's when the baby is born. And it did make me wonder that you asking that question, that maybe the human body would have done just the same, that there is this innate thing of the body knows when, if it's not going to come out now, then it's not going to happen at all. Interesting point. Who knows? Will we ever know? I don't know. We need to talk to somebody like Alice Roberts. She'd probably know.
Oh, yes. That'd be a good question for her, wouldn't it?
We'll ask her that. We are getting her on probably in October. We'll be interviewing her.
Yeah.
She's a busy girl.
Yes. But you're right. It is really outside of our ken, so we can only kind of ask the questions of what the implications of answering that question are in terms of, I suppose, survival. Whether you've got a successful, obviously DNA survives Neanderthal DNA survives in us. So those births did take place, but whether they were more or less easy births, that's another matter entirely, and what the resulting mortality rates were, that's another question entirely. So interesting one, but one that we will have to a fair degree bypass, I'm afraid. Pass on. Yay.
Yes, we can only apologise.
Yeah.
For us.
Yeah.
Yes.
Told you. Anyway, let's move on to Justin's question. But thank you so much, Nigel, for the question. Justin Brown asks, are most of the stone circles of stone, good distinction, perfect circles, are many of them irregular? With a rope and a stick, it's pretty easy to make a near-perfect circle, so when I see a lopsided circle, it makes me wonder. Well, I don't think you're alone there. Yeah, made Aubrey Burl wonder, didn't it?
It certainly did. Certainly did. I mean, there are so many... I mean, they're okay. So there are sites that are... Sorry,
hand up. I have to say, some lunatic just bought us 5 coffees on Buy Me a Coffee. I didn't catch it. I just got a quick notification on the screen. I didn't catch who it was. Whoever you are, if you're there.
Thank you.
Above and beyond. Thank you so much.
It helps wonderfully. There are elliptical circles.
Many of them,
that are clearly deliberately made that way. There are equally, not a huge amount, but some that are just messy. But it's difficult to know for certain whether, is that landslip over thousands of years? I suppose that's possible. I don't know. But yeah, it does seem that they made elliptical sites quite deliberately.
Yeah. And we're going to get, once you go down that route, you won't go far without coming across Alexander Thom, of course, and the megalithic yard.
It's true.
Yeah. We're not adherents to Thom's theories of the megalithic yard. The megalithic yard is far too close to the human length of a human step to be significant in our view, and the measurement of a stone circle is a difficult thing because I don't know where do you measure from and where do you measure to, and using statistics to work out, to be precise about something, a measure that was used, and to come with something that is so precision born out of statistics. It's a bit sketchy to me, despite all the incredible work that he did measuring so many circles. And it's, we owe to him the knowledge that so many of them were elliptical, so many of them were egg-shaped, and he did all sorts of geometric plans of irregular stone circles to support the idea of the megalithic yard. You've got to employ all sorts of complicated geometry to validate an odd shape when you could, as you quite rightly pointed out, make a perfect circle if you've got a rope and a stick. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I will also say just as a separate distinction, and this relates to us, me and Michael, as opposed to anything else, and that's that what we obsess about in the work that we do is about the lives of ordinary people. How people were living and what was life like for these people back in the day. So we don't look so much at the extraordinary things that some of you might know Howard Crowhurst's work, for example. Extraordinary depth of research that he's done, particularly in relation to Karnak in northern France and what have you. But it's really the distinction between, you could be researching. If you are archaeologists in the future, you could be researching how humans had made computers today, as opposed to what Michael and I do, is research how people were actually living, just day to day doing their stuff, because that's how you learn about people. It's more about how they lived as opposed to what they could do. We're all pretty amazing when it comes to being able to do a few extraordinary things here and there, but it doesn't tell you about how you live with your family.
So somebody posed a question there about, or made a statement there about standard lengths. It's Kevin. Megalithic yard. Why would Neolithic folk have a standard unit of measurement? We didn't have standards across Britain until the 1850s. The thing is that standards are really, really useful things. And as we were talking earlier about weights, they're really useful things to have if you're trading.
Yes.
To have,
as we said in the other. In relation to the weights.
I mean, what I'm getting around to is say I do think having a standard measurement of some kind of length would be an extremely valuable thing. So I don't think that Tom's angle proves it. But if people are trading and interacting with each other, then some kind of precision as far as length is concerned, I can't imagine not being a valuable thing. And indeed, the problem is with length. Where do you keep the standard? How do you establish the standard in the first place? If you want any kind of precision. And I would just ask this question, I'll just put it forward as a proposition, is that we hear a lot about the archaeoastronomy aspects of stone circles and Stonehenge and other sites. And I put it to you that maybe, just maybe, there is a way of establishing constant standard length by using archaeoastronomy at certain points, at certain times of the year, that may be viable. I don't know. And that could be a reason, if archaeoastronomy was and is a thing, then that may be a reason for looking at it, to establish, a singular measure of length anywhere in the world, or anywhere in the...
But it's also, I think it's important to say, I mean, Kevin, you're not completely right. That all right, the standard measurements that were then kept by governing bodies that would dictate how long this thing actually was, that might have happened in the 1850s. I don't actually know, but I know that old measurements, for example, like the fathom, as 6 feet in water. Well, the word fathom is, I think it's Anglo-Saxon anyway. It's certainly been in use since 1600. And I think that there must have been, going back, the Romans, I'm pretty sure if you went into a Roman tavern and asked for a beer of any description or a wine of any description, I'm pretty sure they'd have had a fairly standard size of cup in the tavern. Or can you imagine? All hell would have broken loose. Why have you given him more than you gave me? That'd be a bar brawl. Interesting subject, though.
Yeah. But anyway, as to answer your question, Justin, yes, have a look at seek out Alexander Thom, and also Aubrey Burl, of course, who sort of followed up, and who also did precise measurements and descriptions of the different varieties of shapes of circle. As some have mentioned in the chat, indeed, Martin, before Caledonia, immediately said there's the flattened A and the flattened B type. So, yes, our need to categorize things always shows up, doesn't it? I think that is time.
Like to put things in boxes.
We have been talking, we've been answering questions for 1 hour and 50 minutes. And unless there's something you have burning that you need to convey to good people here, I think it's time to wind up and call it a day. And I've noticed that I think we've had another couple of contributions via Buy Me a Coffee just recently, so that's absolutely fabulous. Thank you. So to be clear, the Buy Me a Coffee campaign is to create a tranche of money that will go forward to the main Kickstarter campaign. So all that money is sort of ring-fenced and going forward to the production of the film. If you become a Patreon supporter, then you get on the inside track, and you're sort of helping us do our everyday stuff that we do like this, and helping the development of the film, and being part of that journey with us. So whichever route you choose, thank you, and thank you that to all the good folk that have already chosen to support us. It rocks our boat and knocks our socks off. Thank you so much. I've said my bit.
It does. Yeah. Thank you very much, folks. And thanks for staying there and watching for this long. Good grief.
Yeah. You're all mad.
Yes. You need to get out more. No, thank you. It's always fun. We'll put up the call for questions for the next one shortly.
Yes. Patreon, those of you who are our Patreon supporters, we'll be seeing you again on Thursday night. Two nights away. I better put up that post so you know where to go.
Thursday night. Yes.
Yeah, are we doing a Zoom call, or are we doing a YouTubey thing? I think we've started making them Zoom calls, so it's much more interactive for our Patreon folk. Yeah. Okay. So all that said, it's time to say bye-bye, and thanks again, folks.
Take good care, folks.
Laters.
See you
Bye.
next time. See you.